So in the last video, we learned how to edit our timeline and basically arrange our entire scene with clips. We learned how to trim them, we learned how to add transitions, and pretty much learned how to add simple fade ins and fade outs with these little handles that you actually have on the clips themselves. So now that we have our sequence ready to go, it's time to add some color. And this is my favorite part of Davinci Resolve, and this is actually why I switched to the program in the first place. So to get to the color, obviously we need to go to the color tab, and here you'll see you have a plethora of tools. But what I want to do first is show you guys the interface like we did last time and kind of explain to you each little section, and then I'm gonna lightly cover all of the tools because since they have so many, what I really want to focus on here is showing you how to access particular tools rather than show you exactly everything that each and every tool does. Now, of course, I'm gonna show you lightly what probably the main tools you're gonna need to focus on and actually use the most, but again, this is the absolute basics. I want you guys to feel comfortable with Davinci Resolve and feel confident when playing around. So let's go ahead and dig right in. Now, your layout may be a little bit different from mine, but let me go ahead and show you the tabs. And by layout, I mean you're probably going to have a few things open, and it may look similar to this, more like this. But to start, we have our gallery tab at the far left, and you'll see I just toggle it open and close. And what the gallery tab does is it allows you to actually capture stills and use them for future use. In fact, you can apply color grades to a particular still, and you can export the still with a LUT, and you can even use it to color grade some of your other shots. So it's pretty important, but since we have such a small timeline, I'm really not going to use it. And just so you know, all I did to get that still right there is I right-clicked on my scene right here and I just clicked grab still. But again, we don't need it, so I'm going to close the gallery tab. Now next you have your timeline, and with your timeline it is literally just that. It is what you have arranged in the sequence or in your actual edit view right here. And since we have a very simple and small timeline, I'm going to go ahead and remove that as well. Now the next option is clips, and with all clips, and with the clips, this is a really useful tool for me because this allows me to not only navigate my actual timeline with ease and click through on each of the clips, but it allows me to compare my color correction and my color grades to make sure that each color I apply to each video clip is consistent with the one prior and the one after. So this allows me to really go through and make sure that my scene is really consistent with the color all the way through. So I do want to keep the clips on. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that open, but of course, for more workspace, if you're really focusing in on some color, you could of course close it, and then you have a much larger window here. So moving on to the right, you're going to see we have our nodes. Now nodes are extremely important when color grading because unlike Premiere Pro and what is it called? Oh my gosh, Final Cut. It's actually node based, which means it is quite a bit different from your standard layer system. Now, I'm going to dig into nodes here in a second, but I want to show you, of course, you can toggle on and off with your nodes. Next, you have your effects. Now, as you can imagine, you have all of these effects here. You have your library, and then once you actually apply a particular effect to a clip, you'll see that the settings become active, and then you can adjust the settings from there while still browsing the library on the left and adjusting the settings to the particular effect you dropped on your node on the right side. But I don't want a Gaussian blur on my particular shot, so I'm just going to remove that real quick. And there we go. Oops, still there. There we go. Got rid of the Gaussian blur. And all I did to remove it was just Control-Z on a PC and Command-Z on a Mac. And that's pretty consistent through most programs if you want to undo something. So I have my effects open, and obviously I'm not going to be using any of them for this particular shot. I have no need for the face refinement or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this tab so I have more room to work within my node editor. Now, we have finally the light box. And what the light box is basically just a light box, a larger view of the actual clips. Now again, that's to help if you want to really kind of pixel peek and just check out your colors between shots, ensure that they are properly color graded and even color corrected. So those are all of the excuse me, those are all of the panels. Now, moving on, I wanted to talk to you guys about nodes. Now, like I said, this is quite a bit, well, not quite a bit, it is a bit different from your typical layer system used in most nonlinear editors. So with a node system, it's really cool because you can actually use it as a layer system in which you'd use it and you'd read it from left to right. Or you can actually create advanced nodes and advanced routes with layer mixers, which all in all, layer mixers are a kind of almost a subfolder of layers, if you will. So you have this as one layer, and then you read the layer mixer nodes from the top down. So I could add as many as I want. I could add 3, and it would first apply the effect here, then layer this next effect on top, and then layer this next effect on top of number 4. And then of course you can mix all of this inside of your layer mixer and even choose a composite mode. So as you can see, you can create some really unique effects and colors, and you have so much more control. So we're not going to dig too deep into the difference between layer mixers, parallel nodes, or even just standard nodes. We're going to really focus on just showing you again the basics to color grading, or to the color layout in Davinci Resolve. So I'm going to go ahead and undo everything, just Control Z, remove everything. Look at that. Okay. So like I said, if you wanted to use it as a standard layer system, and the hotkey to create a new node is Alt-S. There we go. And we've created a new node, and then you'd basically apply one effect here. So I could turn my clip, I could go ahead and make the whole clip a little more golden, kind of orangey. And for my shadows, I could drag down and just introduce a little bit of blue for a little bit more contrast. And then I could layer something else upon here, and of course maybe increase my contrast even more so. And there we go. We've already started to color grade this shot. But you'll notice I can toggle different layers, and you'll see through YouTube, you might not see much, but you'll see the contrast has shifted slightly by me removing that layer. And even if I wanted to remove the first layer, it removes the gold that I applied and the blue shadows. So again, layer system, kind of unique, allows advanced control of routing all of your nodes, and it's really cool. I've really come to love it and prefer it as in comparison to all other editors. But we've got to keep this tutorial moving, so let me go ahead. I'm going to remove all of my colors and just remove everything, kind of set it to the default, and you'll notice this outer ring went back to absolutely no color. So if I were to add something, you'll see it has this kind of really pretty ring around it, and as soon as I remove it, it goes ahead and it's removed, showing that you've not added any settings to it, you've not adjusted any of your color settings. So just a quick tip for you right there. Gonna remove my node. All right, so here we are, and we're actually digging into the color tools. So what I want to point out are the tools you're gonna use the most. Now, what I tend to use is your color wheels, you have your curves, you have your qualifier, and then you have masks, tracking, and blur. Pretty much the first 5 and probably 6 are going to be what you use the absolute most on this particular tab, starting with curves. Now again, your layout might look a little bit different from mine if you're working on a laptop or if you're working on a smaller screen. So just know that you will still have access to all the same tools. They're probably just going to be tucked into their own specified kind of subfolder or subcategory, if you will. But let's go ahead and again, remember the primary things you're probably going to use use the most are your color wheels, curves, qualifier, masks, tracking, and blur. But let's go into each of them in depth. So first you have your camera raw, where you can adjust all of your camera raw settings if you are shooting in a raw format. Next you have your color match tab, which you can help achieve that Rec 709 look. And next, again, really important, are your color wheels. Now what I want to point out inside of your color wheels, and some of these other options have them as well, is you have submenus, which are these little dots. Now you have your primaries wheels, and then you have the log wheels, and then of course you have your primary bars. So again, you have your lift, gamma, and gain. You could even use these pointers here to find white if you needed to set a white point to get the proper contrast. And of course you have your offset wheel, where it just, the whole overtone, you'll adjust it by messing with that wheel. To reset it, you simply click on the revert button right here. But of course you can adjust the colors here, and on top of that you have these little wheels down here as well. So we can adjust our gain and crank it up and down, but of course to revert it back to its initial state, you hit this back button. Now what I also want to show you is down here at the bottom, you have these additional two tabs that are found within your color wheels as well, and they control your contrast, pivot, saturation, hue, and luminance mix. And the second tab actually covers your temperature, your tint, and you have your mid-tone detail, color boost, shadows, and highlights. Now what's crazy is that that is just for your primaries wheels, your primaries wheels, but when you go into your actual log, where you're adjusting the shadows, midtones, highlights, you actually have contrast, pivot, you have your low range, high range, saturation, and hue. So you still have saturation and hue, but then on the second page you have again temperature, tint, you have your midtone detail, color boost, shadows, and highlights. But the coolest thing, going back to the first tab, is you can actually set your low range and your high range for your midtones, your highlights, and your shadows. So basically your high range will affect your highlights, so you can actually set how far down you want your highlights to go, and your low range, your shadows will be adjusted all the way up to this particular range. Now there's a plugin that will show you these ranges, and actually we'll kind of dig into that. I actually learned it from another YouTuber. His name is Aram K. He did not ask me to promote him in any way. In all honesty, I've learned a lot of color from him, so I'll link him in the description. But I just want to show you guys that you can control the ranges, so that way if you're trying to adjust your shadows and you feel like it's a little too dark, you can actually pull back and really make them only affect the deeper and darker shadows, like you saw me drag back down there. So we're going to revert that. We're going to set the low range back to normal by double clicking, and then that is set to go. So enough on the color wheels. Go ahead and play with those. I mean, that is the best way to learn, is just test and play with all of the tools available to you. So moving on, we have our RGB mixer, and you'll see you have the monochrome option as well, but this allows you to change your red output, your green output, and blue output. So basically apply all of your saturation, if you will. Sometimes it goes overboard based upon what format you shot on your camera, or if you tried to do a flat image or not. But you have your RGB mixer, and next you have your motion effects. Now here, if you have Davinci Resolve Studio, is where you can also access your noise reduction. So you have your Luma threshold, and we're going to use a little bit of denoiser here. I am shooting on a GH4, which typically has a lot more noise. So you have your Luma and Chroma, so I'm going to increase this just a little bit. And then we're going to move on to the actual colors. So you'll see I have curves active, and again, you will probably have a different layout if you have a smaller screen, but for curves, you'll also notice you have a bunch of different dots as well. And this is where my mind was blown. Like, I am not even joking. When I saw all the different curves that you had inside of Davinci Resolve, I was blown away. And I'm sure you have them in other editors as well, and maybe I just haven't accessed them, and this is not me dogging on any other editors. I love how Davinci Resolve actually laid all of this out. So you have your basic curves, where you can actually choose to link your overall white and then your red, green, and blue, or you can unlink them and actually adjust them individually. I'm going to leave them linked. But then you have further submenus such as hue versus hue, where I could actually click on a particular green. We'll just actually click on the green here, and you'll see it populates in here. Or it'll actually populate the particular hue I just selected. So I can go ahead and adjust everything, and you'll see you can actually adjust all of the colors that are found within that particular hue. So that's where it's hue versus hue. You can again reset it. You have hue versus saturation, so you could bring out a particular color while desaturating a particular color. You have your hue versus luminance, so bring out the brightness or darkness. You have your luminance versus saturation, which is where you can make sure that your shadows are completely black. And then you have your saturation versus saturation. So again, really powerful curves. And I was so excited when I found this. Now, moving on, you have your qualifier. Now, here's where you can actually go in and isolate particular tones. For instance, let's pretend we wanted to adjust Jennifer's blue jeans that she's wearing when I shot this. So I could literally, you'll see it instantly turns to a dropper here. I click on it, and now you'll see on the node, I actually have this, I have the qualifier selected. And to show it on the big screen here, you've just got to hold Shift H, and it'll show you what we've actually selected. And in all honesty, this is a horrible selection. I hope you guys' turns out much, much better than mine. But what you can do is you can adjust the lows and pull those out. You can also adjust how soft it is, so that way, let's say we want to make it a lot softer. And then we can also change the width, and basically you can go through and really isolate particular hues. And of course we want to remove the saturation, we want to pull the low up, so we can really try and pull only the jeans. But there we go, we have just isolated the jeans themselves. Now we could go back to the image, and we could just simply start changing, like using curves, making this particular height or this particular selection like change dramatically. Again, this is a horrible selection, and I hope you do not do anything like this. This is strictly for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to revert my curves, I'm going to reset my qualifier, and we're going to move on to masks. You have your box, you have your circle, you have, and this box has feathering, this box does not. You have your pen tool, and then of course you have a gradient for this particular mask. So it's really cool, and even cooler is you can actually set this mask, we'll use a circle mask for this example, move on to the next window, and you can actually track that particular mask. So I'll go ahead and play the clip, and you'll see it's tracking the tree right here. And we have all of our tracking information, and you'll see again, if I hit Shift H, here is our mask. We can feather it and make all of these adjustments. Now that we have the tracking data, I could isolate just Jennifer, and we could make a bunch of adjustments to maybe brighten Jennifer a little bit, maybe add a tiny bit of color, and just make her pop out from the rest of the scene. So it's really handy, and you can blatantly see that mask here. Obviously it does not look good, but that is the power of Davinci Resolve. You have masks, we're gonna go ahead and remove that, and we're gonna reset our tracking data. But that is what the next tab is your tracker. Now again, you have sub options, you have your stabilizer, and you have your effects. Now the two you're probably gonna use the most are your window, which is where you can track your masks, and then you can use a stabilizer where you have your stabilize, and you can choose what kind of stabilization method you want. Perspective, similarity, translation. Perspective and translation are typically my go-tos, but again, experiment and figure out what you like. So you have your tracker. Moving on further, you have your blur. Now here's where you can adjust your blur if you need to actually soften your footage, or you can actually sharpen it. So again, this is all preference, play with it. Here you have your ratio for that particular blur or sharpening, your pixel ratio, and next is keying. Now the best way to explain this would be for me to actually show you how you could use this in your workflow. Now keying I use mainly for the key output. So what I could do is I could apply a particular or I could create a new node, and then what I could do is let's go ahead and add a 3D LUT that is built in to where is it? Film looks, there we go. We'll add a 3D LUT that is built into Davinci Resolve. We'll go ahead and use Fujifilm Rec 709, and that'll just add this very contrasted look. Now obviously this is a little too much for my particular shot. So what I can do is I can use the key and I can actually reduce the output of this particular node and kind of soften it so it looks a little bit less contrasted on my particular shot. So I can remove it, you can see the difference. So I just applied a LUT, and that's also what I want to show you guys too, and we're gonna dig into that here in a bit. Next, you have your sizing where you can adjust, of course, everything as well: pan, tilt, zoom, rotate. And then finally you have your 3D tab, which again, we have no 3D elements that we're actually editing. So let's go ahead and color some of this. I actually want to remove all of the colors that I've applied here. I have a look that I want in mind, and I want to show you guys a practical application. Oops, saying I'm missing a LUT. Remove my curves that I set up horribly. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and grade this shot. I want to show you kind of the practical applications to all of these tools. So here you're going to see reset node grade. There we go. Here you're going to see we have our shot. It's only an 8-bit camera. Again, I'm shooting on a GH4, so it doesn't have high dynamic range. But I did shoot in a pretty flat profile, and honestly, I love how it looks. I love the composition. So let's go ahead. I want to first bring out the saturation and the contrast that should be found in this shot. And that's typically what I do in my first shot here. So what I want to do, since it is GH4, I'm going to first adjust my luminance and denoise it a tiny bit, probably right about here. And again, these are numbers I've come to learn from my particular camera. So I'm going to then, I want to make sure my saturation is increased, not too much. Probably about there. And then of course you can adjust your contrast, or you could use curves for the same effect. So I'm going to increase my contrast. I don't like how that looks and the lack of creative control. So I want to go ahead and drag. I want to actually have my shadows be there, but still brighten up my highlights just a bit. And there we have a basic correction. Now we're going to move on to another node, and again, add Alt S for a new node. And I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of orange to the entire scene. Now I can also go ahead and add a new node, and then we can add a little bit of shadows to the blue to the shadows. So let's go ahead and do that, or a bluish teal, and you'll see. Now if I were to go crazy, you'll see, yeah, that looks like crap. But just a little bit. Make it look a little bit cleaner, look a little bit better. And then the coolest thing inside of the color tab is you can match shots. So I can go through here, and if I have a middle mouse click, let's pretend I want to grade this shot in the exact same way. They have pretty much similar lighting, or they have extremely similar lighting. All I have to do is select this clip and then use my middle mouse scroll wheel and just click the clip I want to replicate. So I click here, and you'll see it applies that same grade. Now they also have hotkeys as well. So I can use the equal sign for this particular clip to then take the color grading that I have also put upon clip number 3. So I can use the equal sign and it applies it as well. Same with number 5. And there's a quick way of color grading, and you'll see here we have to adjust some more because I was shooting on a drone. So that's where we'd go in, we'd tweak it. Obviously we need to go back in here, we need to brighten this a lot more, and you can right click on the actual curves to adjust it. So we'll brighten it, and probably got to brighten the shadows just a tiny bit as well. But we'd go through and make all of these adjustments, and we'd probably even need to fix the greens, just because on a Mavic Pro and GH4 their colors are just totally out of whack sometimes. Even with the same white balance settings, it's amazing. But that is pretty much it for the color section of Davinci Resolve. Now for the rest of this, it's just kind of a downhill kind of road. It's going to be really easy. And next you have audio and of course delivering the project. So we have tackled the biggest parts to Davinci Resolve. And since Fairlight, the audio tab is relatively new, we'll be able to cover that in no time in the next video. So that is it, you guys. Hopefully you found this relatively useful, and if not, by all means, I apologize that I just wasted your probably 10, maybe 20 minutes. I don't know how long this is right now. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, as it will help be seen by others. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you again for your time, and I will be sure to see you guys in the next video.